you always felt like music theory is just a monster on your shoulder, holding you back? Kind of like this guy? Have you always been curious about music theory but never taken the plunge to actually start learning it? Are you just getting started with music production and know that having a foundational knowledge about music theory would help you move forward in your music productions? Well, in this video, we're going to cover all the basics that you need to know, so let's get started. Hey yo, what's up? Alex here from MetaMind Music, where it's my mission to help you succeed as the music creator you are meant to be, giving you the latest on creativity, mindset, and building your career all around music production. So welcome, and in this video, we're gonna dive a little bit deeper into Music Theory 101, just to give you the foundational knowledge you should be aware of to bring your music productions to the next level with some music theory. All right, so I have a plugin called Scalar loaded up, which shows you the keys I'm pressing on my keyboard, right? Because it's just easier to showcase, talk about what's going on with some visual feedback. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so one of the first foundational things that I want to talk about is what is called intervals, okay? And intervals are simply the distance between two notes. So if we are in C major, which is all the white keys on a keyboard starting on C, so I'll play it for you. C. I mean, we've all heard that, right? That's do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do. And this is called the C major scale, going from C2 to C3 in this case, covering all the white keys gives you the C major scale. And within the range of one C to the next C is what is called an octave. And the first thing I want to zero in on is this concept of intervals, okay? And this is the distance between two notes. So if we look at the major scale, right, we have C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C again. And each of these notes have a specific distance from the root note being C. So if we look at the distance between C and D, we'll notice that it has what is called a whole tone or a whole step between them. Okay, and this means that we're going to skip over one key to get there. So it'd be one, skip over this one, two. So this distance is what is called a whole step. If we continue upwards, the distance between C and E is two whole steps, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Or it's a whole step higher than the D, one distance of two keys. But now if we continue from E to F, you'll notice that there's no key between them, right? So the distance between E and F is what is called a semitone or a half step, okay? So a half step is one key separated. That's a half step, and then two keys separated is a whole step. All right, so understanding that the major scale has a specific pattern of whole steps and half steps that makes up the major scale intervals. So if we look at C to D, that's a whole step. D to E, that's a whole step. But now E to F, that's a half step. Okay, and this is where you start to learn the pattern. So it's whole step, half step, whole step again from F to G, whole step again from G to A, whole step again from A to B, and then half step from B to C. So if you can remember that pattern, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, commit that to memory. Then when you're in a key that's not in C, let's take any other key, for example. So let's go in A. You can follow that formula to find the A major scale now. So if we're here, what was our pattern? It was whole step, half step, whole step, half step. So that was my A major scale. Right? Whoops. Right? And you can use this pattern to find any major scale in any key, right? Whatever note is the root note. In that case, it was A. When we started, it was C. If you follow that pattern, you'll be able to find the major scale, all right? And we're going to get into why the major scale is so important. But, so before we continue, I want to mention that intervals have different names depending upon their distance, okay? So in the major scale, the C major scale, let's go back there because it's easier to work with. Every interval is called a major interval. So from C to D, that interval is called a major second. Okay. From C to E is called a major third. Okay, we've heard this sound before, but this is what gives it's a major interval. So the fourth and fifth interval in a scale are actually called perfect, augmented, or diminished in their quality as opposed to major and minor. Okay, so a major second could also be a minor second, right? That's what a minor second sounds like. A major third could also be a minor third. And the fourth and fifth intervals are called perfect. So this is a perfect fourth, the fourth step in the scale, and the fifth step in the scale is a perfect fifth. And a fifth can either be diminished or a fourth can be augmented. Okay, so they're just basically described by different words than the major and minor intervals. And if we continue upwards, the A is a major sixth, all right? And then the last note is a major seventh until we get back to the octave. Okay, so major scale has major second, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, major seventh, and then the octave again. So if you can remember that, to get any other scale, all you have to do is change specific intervals within the major scale, because the major scale is the widest amount of notes possible. So the C major scale actually has the widest possible range of intervals. And if we want to get, let's say, the minor scale, which actually is on my screen here. So if I click that, you'll notice that on my keyboard, now if I were to follow the scale, right, because this note has a little blue indicator on it. Anyway, so you'll notice that is a minor third, not a major third, right? Or major third would be here. But the minor scale has a minor third. It has a perfect fourth, just like the major scale. It has a perfect fifth, just like the major scale. But it has a minor sixth, and it has a minor seventh instead of the major sixth and the major seventh like we saw in the major scale. But if we think about it in terms of our major scale, the minor scale is basically the same thing, but we just take these three notes, right? The major third, the major sixth, and the major seventh, and we just flatten them, which is basically moving them down half a step lower to these three notes, which would be the major third in relative to C. This would be the major third. This would be the minor sixth, and this would be the minor seventh. And then if we move those three notes, we get the minor scale. Right? Now we can start to see how powerful just this basic knowledge is. If we move over to the Dorian mode, which is a different scale, all these modes are different scales, but if we stay in the root of C, you'll notice that this is exactly the same as the major scale, except our major seventh goes down to a minor seventh, and our major third goes down to a minor third. And a great thing to keep in mind is the third interval of any scale or any chord, and we're going to get into chords in a quick second. The third is what indicates whether it is minor or major. So if you have a minor third here, automatically this scale is a minor scale. But in our major scale example, we had a major third. And because the third interval was a major third, that's what decides the quality of the scale or the chord that you're working with. So if we're working with Dorian, for example, the scale, it's very similar to the major scale, but all we're doing is taking the major third, moving it to minor third, and we're taking this major seventh and moving it to minor seventh. So the whole scale sounds like. I love that scale personally, but you can see how having knowledge of these basic intervals and the distance between notes, and then either flattening them, which means bringing them down half a step, or sharpening them, bringing them up half a step, you can then find all of these other modes and scales just by adjusting the intervals of your major scale. All right, so I quickly want to talk about chords. And a triad, which is the most basic form of a chord, is constructed of a third and a fifth. So if we're in the major scale, C major, right? We would take the root, the third, and the fifth. And this is what you would call the major triad. And that's how we build chords in their most basic form. If I wanted a minor chord, all I would do is take the root, I would take this major third and move it down to a minor third, and then I would do the fifth again. So there's your minor chord. And this is the most basic form of creating chords, but you can then extend chords by, let's say, adding a 9, which would be the ninth interval in a minor scale, would be the second basically, but up an octave, which gives you a 9. And if I also played that with the minor chord, very moody, and that would be that would be a minor 9 chord, right? And we can also add major 7 in there. That's a huge question mark, or we could make it a minor 7, right? Which is a little bit more sophisticated. This is actually a big question mark, very dramatic chord. But just understanding these basic things, if I wanted a major version of a 9 chord, just move the third to major third, right? Or if I wanted a major 7, add the 7th interval, the major 7th. If I wanted a minor 7th chord, then I would move this major third to a minor third, and the major 7th to a minor 7th. Oh, whoops, sorry. There we go. There's your minor 7. And then I could even move this root note higher if I wanted. And once you start moving, as you notice, I play this lower C at the higher C. That's what's called an inversion. And I could do that again. I could play this minor third an octave higher. And that's still a minor 7 chord, but it's an inversion. So you want to keep in mind that the most basic version of a chord is a triad. And for example, if I move down to the bottom part of the screen, we're in Dorian, sorry, we'll go back to major. So when I hit this button, it plays the first triad available in C major, which is based off the C. But if we move up to the second note, D in the major scale, we can make a chord from D. And this would be the same thing, a triad. But you'll notice that if we have a root of D, it's actually a minor chord. But we're talking relative to C. Very nice sound. But you'll notice that every note in the C major scale has its own corresponding triad. Okay, so this would be the first one. C major. D is D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished, and so on. And it's just basically creating triads based on every note in the scale until you get back to C again. So now that we know how to build triads based upon different notes in our scale, this is what will help us build chord progressions. So if I have my C major triad, that's what is called your 1 chord, right? And you could go to the 5th chord, which would be your 5 chord, to your 4 chord, right? And every subsequent note in the scale has a number attached to it. So D minor would be your 2, 3rd, E minor would be your 3rd, so on and so forth. But this is where you could have like you hear chord progressions like a 1, 4, 5, right? So that would be your 1, your 4, your 5, right? You've heard that many times. Or it could be like 2, 5, 6, 1. And this is the essence of building super basic chord progressions, is by knowing the different triads in whatever scale you're working with, and then ordering them in different variations to create harmonic movement. So I hope that clarifies a few foundational concepts about music theory and helps you get started creating chords and exploring different scales by modifying that major scale. If you have any other questions about music theory or would like me to deep dive into a specific concept in music theory, just let me know in the comments below. And until then, we'll talk to you soon.